We need to talk about pricing. So today's rundown is really going to be about crash outs and cashing out. So essentially, there's a little bit of discussion that the Anthropics and to a degree ChatGPT are taking a mick, essentially charging way too much for the product, and people aren't happy with it. Now, I've done a monologue in a previous episode where I explained that actually the problem isn't Anthropic, the problem is us. And the problem is us in the sense that we've had a period of time, last 25 years, where we've been able to onboard software and the value proposition of the software has not been as clear as it should be. In many ways, some of the best software we have today, let's just take Salesforce as an example, is really software that acts as an SOP, a standard operating procedure. And I've been bandying that term about every time I've been out and wonder how many people pick it up. And some people say, oh, yeah, I know you mean procedures, you write down what you do. And other people look a little bit quizzically at me and say, well, what are you talking about, Willis? And they say that because maybe the firm isn't at that level where they've got thousands of people running around doing all sorts of nonsense that they have to write it down, or that they're a more innovative firm, which could also be the case, or the fact that actually they just haven't got around to it yet, or they haven't tried to outsource anything. And so the SOPs really dictate how you operate when you have like hundreds of people running around. And the standard operating procedures are helped by software. In a sense that if we think of it as the real value proposition of Salesforce, what is it? Well, yes, I can retain some records of clients. Yeah, that's lovely. Yes, I can put some conversations in there, summarized. Yeah, that's lovely. Yes, I can kind of predict what is going on with this particular salesman or saleswoman, how much activity they've done. But most importantly, I need to be able to forecast revenue. Now, the digital black book, so they can't walk out the door with their clients. Yeah, that's interesting, but I mean, need the personal relationship, so they can do whatever they want in reality. Some of the other stuff it does, lovely, but the most important thing, say if you've got 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in your firm, and a lot of frontline staff, you want to be able to predict revenue and also to be able to use that to do comp, to do all sorts of stuff. So the prediction that comes out of it is much more important than kind of the previous things that were done, whether it be the conversation being recorded, the kind of updates, and obviously the details of where exactly they live and where they are. And that's lovely. But most importantly, it's for that reason. And so what it does then is tie people into standard operating procedure, which say, we are going to get you to do everything we think possible and necessary to enable us to carry out and execute a good forecast of the revenue based on what you're selling, the backlog, how far you progressed, your ratings, etc. And if you weren't to use something like Salesforce and try and do it manually, then you'd have like a weekly catch up with someone who'd probably BS you a little bit in person. Oh, I'm going to make this much, and had a chat with Jemima last week and she's like bang up for taking our product and stuff. It would all be fanny, let's be fair. So this is a way of putting it into black and white that it becomes a standard operating procedure for really carrying out a forecast. Now, why am I elaborating about this? I'm elaborating on this point because I suppose if you fundamentally misunderstand the point of the software that we had, then you can compare the software that we're getting via AI to the old software, and they're not comparable at all. And they're not comparable because the AI doesn't actually try to act as an SOP. In fact, it's the reverse. It's something you can barely repeat because it's probabilistic. And the fact that you can't actually repeat what you did in the first place meant it can only ever be experimental, as in to find what they say, lightning in a bottle, is the term I think people used. And once you found it once, like a hit record, I wrote a hit record even, better grammar, then there's no reason why you can assume you can write a next one. Or if you're good, or you have a partnership like Lennon and McCartney, yeah, of course you can, but there's no assumption that you can write a second record which catches lightning in a bottle. And in many ways, the AI is something that enables you to catch lightning in a bottle, not something that enables you to proceduralize SOPs with a digital form or a digital face. And that dichotomy is where we're really struggling to say, why isn't it priced exactly like we had the software in the old days? Well, the software is the old days, as they say in The Wire. The old days are the old days. And the old game is the old game. The deterministic, predictable Salesforce is being replaced by a kind of probabilistic, slightly eccentric product. And it's going to be brilliant, and it's also going to be shite sometimes. And you have to take the rough with the smooth. And in that, as we go through article by article, you can see some of the ruptures that this is causing. And it's really, what's the word I'd use? It's really the dissonance being caused by the fact that we're trying to match software with AI, and AI as a kind of superior software, but it's not really superior software. It's just different. It's very, very different, almost the antithesis of the SOP software, which I'm going to start labeling the old school software. SOP software, HubSpot, Salesforce, SalesLoft, is it SalesMule or MuleLoft or whatever it's called, or whatever it's called. And then you have the kind of ERP ones in the cloud now, the whether it be SAP for HANA or whatever it's called in the cloud, the Oracle in the cloud. These are all ways of saying, I am going to box everybody who works for you absolutely into a box, which drives them insane the amount of, or the lack of flexibility in the tool. But if the product is you want to get a good forecast out there, then this is a product for you, whether it be SAP or SalesLoft or the MuleSoft, I think is the right name, Salesforce, etc. This is really forcing you into a corner. So as we move forward to the first article, what's the first article on? Well, it basically said CFOs and the new economics. It's where someone from Anthropic is doing like a bit of economic analysis. So let's just head over there now. Now, this article is one from, say, from Cursor, where I think they have an economist as well, but Anthropic definitely have an economist. Some guy from Stanford or whatever. So the mere fact that they've got an economist, maybe not in Cursor, but in Anthropic, is saying that we need to define a new economics for you. We need to kind of tell you how to look at this product, how to value this product. Something that Google perhaps didn't have to do with PPC, because it basically said, pay for click, and they were very, very cheap. So if you basically advertise here, you're going to get more sales. It's very simple. This is a little bit more nuanced, and you're going to have to basically put a shift in trying to explain to people. So here, Cursor, maybe the economist or CFO council, are writing that obviously AI spend's going up and up and up. Intelligence is showing up in revenue. I'm not quite sure that's very easy to see as an outside consulting firms. Returns on intelligence are not equally distributed or unevenly distributed, of course. Anything where you have, you say, inputs which are roughly the same but can change per individual, and outputs on a probabilistic machine are going to be wild. And that's what we've seen. And the more you use it, I suppose, the more you understand how to put context in there, etc. But those numbers are going to be pretty wild. But most importantly, this is kind of why I came to this article. The cost per unit of work varied widely. This is the most important part. Some of the crash out recently is because the costs are too high. But it's very similar, as I said before, is similar to, why do I need a Birkin bag if I just need to carry a carton of milk? You carry the Birkin bag if you can afford it for a flex. That is very, very different from value that you get from just transportation. There's a separate Veblen style value from that transaction. So you could argue 50 quid for pure transaction ability, and then, I don't know, you have a 29,950 from purely just a flex. You want to flex on your mates. So this basically says the cost per unit work varies widely. Even where AI is clearly working, cost varies a lot. In the Developer Habits report, cost per agent request varied by 9 times across model families, while cost accepted basically line varied by roughly 7 times. So it's roughly saying that you can get up to 9x variance in cost depending which model you pick, which is pretty obvious because some of the models are crazy expensive and some are slightly cheaper. But what they're really saying is some of the work that you're doing on this top end is really Mickey Mouse. You could be using a Mickey Mouse model for that. And if you use the Mickey Mouse model, then you'd be laughing. You wouldn't have to pay the cost that you're moaning about and going on TV crashing out about. You would basically be golden. But what that exposes, then you have to know what people are doing individually. You have to kind of token gate in some sort of way, unless you're going to have someone doing a scrum permanently with everybody using AI. Then you'd have to know who's getting the most out of the AI, who is doing that PPC loop where you're going to Google, putting money on and knowing that you're going to get, I don't know, 20, 30, 40%, maybe double the money back in the early days. But who is going to do that work? There are separate model routers, things like Kiro, etc., which enable you to do that. But even then, it may not be perfectly efficient. You still need to somehow find an efficient cost frontier based on the level of work you're doing, which means you'll have to unitize or atomize the work to such a degree where you possibly could outsource it. At least you make it comparable with outsourcing, because Jimmy over there is doing those 10 things in a routine so much, too much his annoyance that actually he believes he's some sort of lab rat. That is a process that you can knock down. We don't yet have that, and most organizations don't have that, hence the moaning about the cost. The cost may be high, but you don't have to choose that model. And then you'll see this play out in the next article, where it says that Chinese models are beginning to really, really stamp their foot on the market and say, we will dominate this market, because people want from A to B. They don't want us to steal their data. Well, who knows if that's happening, ideally, even though that's happened with most LLMs. But what we do want is we want to basically show you that this is how much it costs, bare metal cost. And that's starting to attract a few capitalists, shall we say? Excuse my left. So let's move on to that next article right now. This article is where the problem manifests of the kind of, you can call it cost mismanagement, because if you're not able to roll down the curve for the efficient kind of output versus cost frontier, then of course you're going to basically have to just go lower cost for everything. And so here you'll see the Chinese models take 30% of US open router tokens since Feb 8, pretty much saying they've been consistently 30 odd % of the usage of open models, because most of the models are closed in the US, don't have it in the UK, and so therefore people are flocking to open source, and of that 30% of that tends to be AI from China. Now it's a problem if you worry about the kind of global economics and stuff, which I'm not at all worried about, but it's more of a problem in the sense that rather than solving the cost problem and therefore the value output problem, what you can sell it for, what it's meant is that people are focused on cost, and they've just gone, oh, bugger that, it's too difficult, let's just go to a lower cost. And that basically spells doom, because it means that at the lowest cost end, you may not be able to achieve what is really profitable work, something the client sits up and goes, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do that. You won't necessarily get that at the low end. At the low end, you get the kind of social media rejig, you get maybe mails, emails, etc., maybe a PDF or two of a letter, but you don't get that cutting edge revenue, the information that you want. So that said, let's move on to the next article, which kind of explains why the economics is becoming a big topic. Then when this first came out a little while ago, I thought this was an absolutely baller move. Essentially, what it says is that Anthropic is hiring a kind of chief economist-ish person, I believe, and that person will be very, very needed to explain cost curves and rolling them down and finance the frontier optimization of cost versus value. There's a lot for that person to do. They've got a big job, so I welcome seeing how they do it. But most importantly, it's saying that we need to be able to explain to you exactly what's going on. We're going to dress it up as just human survival, because we're decimating the low-end jobs now. And so this is further proof of the fact that the system is broken. And the system is broken in the fact that it can't actually absorb, you can argue, absorption pricing from these vendors, because it's still set up for seat. It's kind of adopting a seat brain, Whereas these articles all talk to that really the market is telling us we need to price the work, not the workers. And by pricing the work, that might go down to a very, very, very low, infinitesimally low level, but that's necessary for the cost effectiveness of this machine. And if you don't do that, then of course you're going to be on TV talking about how AI is changing your company and not for the better.
We need to talk about pricing, Velvet Rope Cartel, turning every checkout into Dante's seventh hell. Can we simplify gets treated like a crime, cause complexity looks smart when you present it in a slide. Every metric looking healthy till the profit disappear, like magic trick performed by venture capitalists of the year. Net retention floating high like a helium parade till the AWS invoice enters with a switchblade.